All right, guys. Actually, I had been in some medical emergency since afternoon, and even today, I just thought that I'll do the session. So some of you or many of you might not have received the recordings, or some people have some login issues. So I will look into it, but I'll need some time. Okay, so we'll just quickly cover the topics which we planned for today, and few of the things which are pending from my end. I have made a note of all those. Give me some time, and I'll take care of those. Okay. So any questions before we get started with today's agenda? All right. So I think we will get started. So in the last session, what we have done is we have talked about uh, some other shapes, right? Which is this notepad. Give me a moment. Okay. So in the last session, we have talked about some of the new shapes, right? And can anybody recall what are those shapes which we have just introduced yesterday?
Data processes
Data
and
process
set
shape.
properties.
Okay, we talked about the data process shape. Within the data process shape, what are the operations we did?
Split
Split
documents, combine
document, combined
documents.
document.
Very nice. We have done the split documents and we have done the combined documents. These are the two operations which we have done in the data process shapes. Apart from that, we talked about a new shape, another shape called a set property shape. Okay, what are the types of properties we have?
Document property, dynamic
Document,
process.
we have document. Okay, we have dynamic document property. Dynamic document property is also referred as DDP sometimes. Then what we have process properties, which is also referred as PP. And then what is the next one? Dynamic process properties, which is also referred as DPP. And there is one more, which is nothing but MIME properties. These are not used so extensively. In some of the use cases, this might be required. Right. So these are the two things we have seen. Apart from that, we have seen how can we use disk connector with the write operation, right? We have seen how can we override the directory and how can we override the file name, right?
File name.
So these are the few things we have seen. Apart from that, I think we have tried to understand the behavior of the decision shape. I hope by now we all should be clear why do we need a decision shape? I mean, why do we need a data process shape before a decision shape? So right now we were reading a single file, and in that single file there were multiple employees data, and we were supposed to make a decision on the basis of a location, right? Can anybody recall why at all we needed this data process shape?
To split the documents.
Yeah, because single document when goes to the decision shape, the decision is made on the first occurrence,
First occurrence.
right? Which may or may not be the right thing, because we would want the decision to happen for each and every employee separately. And the only way to achieve it with current design is that we go and split this document such that we get one document per employee, right? So this takes care of that. And eventually, when we were writing the file, we just combined everything, right? So these are the few things we have done, right? We'll take things to the next level, but I hope we are good so far, right? So far we have seen a start shape. We have talked about try catch shape on a high level. Then we know decision shape. We know about stop shape. We know about map shape, right? We are anyhow using connector shape, right? We have tried to see two connectors so far, disk connector and the Oracle database connector. So I think we should be good so far, right? So let's move on. So now one thing which is very peculiar about Boomi is, when you move from one shape to another, right? Your document format keeps on changing, right? So initially, when you started with the document, what format of the document was there with us?
XML.
Yes. So initially we started with XML and then we read the file. And when once we read the file, uh, it was an XML format, which is absolutely correct. And then we do the transformation here. Which format do we get as a resultant of this transformation?
Database.
Database format. Absolutely correct, right? So then what happens is, let's say if the data is successfully written into the database, right? So if something goes wrong over here, this is going to error out. And if it is successful, if it is working fine, then probably what you want to do is, uh, you would want to, let's say, write that data, or you want to archive that data. Yeah. So whatever data has been successfully processed. So for error data, you are anyhow writing into a file, right? When I say error data means the data which is not qualifying for synchronization, isn't it? You are writing that into a file, and the directory also you had created. But now let's assume you have a requirement that whatever data you have successfully, uh, whatever data you have successfully inserted, even you want to maintain a copy of the data somewhere, right? So how can you do that? What I'm saying is, this is what we have, right? Now the data is successfully inserted into the database, and any record which is successfully inserted into the database, maybe I want to combine all such employees data and I want to write into a separate file. So yesterday we wrote a file, maybe employees error, and similarly, let's say I want to have a new folder which is maybe employee success, and in that I want to, you can say, kind of archive the file, or you just want to maintain a record of all the employees which were successfully processed, right? So now what happens is, the file which you would want to store typically will be the, has to be in the same format as was the of your original file, and that is XML format, right? Now, do we get the control after the this database connector? If let's say I try to add any shape after the database connector, will the control go there?
No.
It doesn't, right? And why does it happen so?
Uh, After writing the data into database, it will not return any document.
Very nice. It does not return any document, and because of which there is a problem, right? So now what do you think? What is the possibility, right? So once the data is inserted, we might want the original format of the data with us. This is a common problem which you will encounter with Boomi, that your data format keeps on changing, and whatever was your original format of the data, you somehow do not have that, right? So now whenever we get into such a requirement, right, which is very, very usual, that you combine the data, you kind of transform the data, now the data format got changed, but now you need the original format data. So there are multiple ways to basically retrieve your original format of the data. So one of the simplest ways we have is that, at this point in time, do I have, I mean, if I go to this to branch here, let's say at this point, will I have all the documents which are successfully, or which should successfully go to the database? Yes or no? I should have it, right? At this point in time, in the true branch, I should have all such employees data which are successfully criteria, I mean, which are successfully qualifying for synchronization. And if this branch does not error out, that means that should have also gone to the, or that should have successfully inserted into the database, right? If something fails in this, then that means it might not be going to the database successfully. So now in Boomi, there is a shape called as a branch shape. This shape is used very, very extensively. It's very important to understand about this. A lot of people have some misunderstandings about this because of, now what I'm trying to do is, I'm adding a new shape called as a branch shape. And where do I add it? I add it right after the decision shape. And after the decision shape, there are two branches, true branch and false branch. I am adding it into the true branch. And what does this branch shape do is, branch shape creates the copy of the documents which are passed to it. So let's say after the decision shape, 100 documents come to this branch shape. So this branch shape will create one copy for each document which is sent to the another branch. And here we can have the number of branches ranging from 2 to 25. So let's say I have 3 branches, right? So what it will do is, it will create 3 copies of how many documents, of as many documents as is the input to the branch shape. And each copy, or each set of copies are sent to the respective branches. And this whole this whole process happens in a sequential manner, which means after first, only the control will come to the second. After second, only the control will come to the third. If first fails, control will not come to the second on its own until and unless you do some kind of error handling in first, right? So what I'm trying to say is there is a shape called as a branch shape, right? Which has the tendency to create the copy of the documents. So whenever you come across a payment problem statement, right, wherein you feel that some document is going to a specific branch where that document gets modified or gets transformed into another format, but once that operation which is defined in the branch number one gets successfully completed, I might need the original format with me, right? And the only way to retrieve that original format is that beforehand I use a branch shape, right? That branch shape would create the copy of the documents, and it will have as many copies, okay, as are the number of documents. So for example, here there is only one document, right? So now, but we have three branches. So it will create three copies, one for each branch. Whatever goes to the branch one will not go to the branch two. A lot of people assume that whatever is the output of the branch one will go to branch two, which is absolutely incorrect. Branch one input is different from branch 2. It might look same because the format will be absolutely identical, but then those are two separate documents. Those are two different copies of the same document. So whatever changes you make in the first copy will not reflect in the second copy. And since it does not do so, and that is the whole intent of using branch shape, that we might come across scenarios where the first copy should work on its own, and we might need a second copy where we might want to do a separate kind of operation, right? So how many copies we will have, that depends on the number of branches, right? But if even I'm getting 100 documents, so I will get three different copies of those 100 documents. First one for the first branch, second one for the second branch, and third one for the third branch, right? And likewise, we can have at most 25 branches if required. Whenever you're working on any real-time project, this particular shape is kind of must to use. I would say you will hardly have processes where you will not make use of branch shape. Okay, so a lot of people assume branch means these looks parallel, so these execute in parallel, which is not correct. So branch shape should come from which category? What do you think? Execute category, logic category, or connect category?
Logic.
It should come from logic category. So if you see the first shape we have in the logic category is the branch shape. So it will, and what does it do? It creates a multiple copies of the documents. How many sets of copy? Depending on the number of branches we have. These all branches are sequential. And in which sequence do these get executed is another question. The sequence in which it gets executed is equivalent to the number which is written over here. Can you see there is a numerical notation 1, 2, 3. So the branch which is denoted as a numerical 1 will get executed first. If you feel no, this is not my first, so you can change it. You can make it like this also. Okay, sometimes people will design this process like this, and we, instead of looking at the number, by default assume that this is the first branch, which is incorrect. You have to look at this number, right? If I write like this branch will get executed first, then the control will go to the second, and then will go to the third. And if you want to prove, how can we prove? Can we take a stop shape and put? Okay, what I'll do here, can I do this? What does this end and return do?
It will
Data
not,
will not pass to other.
Nothing will pass to
second and
three.
third branches.
One.
Yes, it will not let any other branch to execute further. So see, the control came to 1. It didn't let second to execute, third to execute, not even false branch, right? So it's like the moment you encounter this, you're stopping the flow of execution. And this proves that it is not the order which is visible, like which is coming on the top. It is the order based on the numerical donation uh, notation, right? Here you have 1. So this gets executed first. So this should be clear. These are not parallel. These are one after the other. If one successfully gets executed, then only the control will go to the second and then third likewise, right? So if you want, just we can switch it like this. So right now I might need only two branches. So I'll live with two. I'll get rid of the third one, right? Now the point I was trying to say is you have to also observe what is coming to the second branch, right? So what I'll do is I'll just run it one more time. Okay. Now we don't see anything going to the second branch because again, if you
End and
see,
return.
it is end and return, right? So we'll just get this in place. Okay, here is a stop shape 0.24 KB. Document comes to this stop shape. Let's look at the document. How does it look like? It is an employee data with the name Sumit Agarwal. And when we go to the second branch, right? Again, the same, when I say same document means these are two different copies of the same document, right? So when the control comes here, how many document we have? Only one, right?
One.
See when the control came to the branch shape, only one document. So for that one document, how many copies will get created?
Two copy.
Two copies, right? Why two copies? Because there are two branches, one copy for each branch. So first branch gets a first copy and second branch gets a second copy. Any questions, guys, so far? All right. If there are no questions, let's move ahead. So now what do you think? Okay, now we know how to create the copy of the document, okay, using the branch shape. Now, what do you think as per our requirement, right? Our requirement is once the data is successfully inserted into the database, right? We would want that data, that employee data or the employees data which were successfully processed to be written into one file. So what should we do after that?
Try to place that in some file.
Yes. So did we write that same logic yesterday over here? More or less similar, isn't it? So you can copy set of shapes in single go the way I did. I will show you again. You just drag this like this and you say copy and let's say I paste it over here like this. So understand this. So here we wrote the logic for combining the documents. Then we wrote the logic for set property. So will it be same or it will be different?
Different.
It has to be different, right? Because the set property shape was for success, whereas the other one is for failure, right? And how about this disconnector? This can be same or it has to be different. It can be same, right? Because we are using the same connection and operation is more or less same because this is getting overridden by set property shape. So the point I'm trying to convey is we can reuse everything apart from the set property shape. Does that make sense for you guys? Okay, let us do it. Okay, so there was employees error. Right now, I will just change it to employee success for time being. And what is the file name? Instead of error, I'll make it success. Okay. So set properties is a shape or is it is a component?
It's a shape.
Shape.
It's a shape, right? And it's not a component. So now I made the changes, right? I reuse majority of the stuff we wrote yesterday, right? And let's try to run it. Okay, so we have some of the documents going to the database, some of the documents going to this also. So the ones which will go here will be the only documents which will come over here also, right? And by any means, if this branch fails, the control will not go to the second one. Okay, now you have the control going here. Now straight away, let's go to the directory. Do we see a new directory? Employee success. Yes. And you can see some data also populating over here. So that means we are able to successfully create a copy of the data which was being inserted into the database, and then the same logic which we wrote yesterday, we kind of reuse that logic, apart from the fact that we had modified some of the values in the set property shape, and we could successfully go and write the data into the directory. Any questions, guys, so far?
Yeah, in this branch, right? Second, in the false part, there the things are very common. We could have create a sub process and directly we can have used. Is that not the way, or we cannot do?
Yes, we can do, but people don't know about subprocess, right? So first of all, people need to realize what is the need of subprocess, right? And that's why I've created this,
Okay, okay, no problem.
right? So, like, who was speaking? Was it Mahesh?
Yeah, we're here.
Okay, Veer. So Veer mentioned something about subprocess, right? Which is a very valid point. And now our people do not know, right, what is a subprocess. So now whenever you see there is some logic, right, which is common across the board, right? So let's say right now I'm doing like this, right? Maybe there are many branches like this. So we would not want to write the same logic multiple times, because in IT, whenever you are doing any kind of development, right, regardless of the tool, we try to avoid redundancy of the code, right? Duplicacy of the code is not recommended. And the reason why it is not recommended is because first of all, it is an overhead of writing the same code multiple times, which may not look as a big overhead in Boomi because we just did like this and did a copy paste. But then the maintainability of the code is another issue. If tomorrow you have to go and change few things here and there, if let's say you have 10 branches, you have to go and make changes at 10 places, you might forget at one place, which creates a lot of issue, right? So the recommendation generally is that whenever you see some piece of code or some set of shapes which gets combined together and you see these can be reused across, it is recommended to convert that into a separate process. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make is, so far what I'm doing is whatever operations or whatever design or development we did, we are doing in a single process. But when you start working in a real time, there are multiple ways people can achieve it. One way is the way we are doing. If you feel the process is not so complex, then you can go ahead with this approach also. There is no problem. Or else, generally, what we do is we develop a parent process, right? Which is like this one. But in this parent process, we will not do any kind of connector calls. Okay. For all the connector calls, typically what we might do is we might build a separate sub processes, and this should not be a hard and fast rule. Okay, you have to understand the need. If you feel having a sub process is making sense, go and do it. If you think having a sub process is not making sense, do not do it. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is, if you see here, there are certain parts which are common across the board, right? And if you feel it would make sense to push them into a separate process, you can try to do that. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is, uh, there is a shape called as a process call shape. There is a shape called as a process call shape. Okay, what does this process call shape do? This shape is capable of calling one process from another process. Okay, this shape is capable of calling one process from another process. So right now we are in the process number A with the name process sync employees disk from disk to DB, right? Now, if you feel this particular process needs to call some other process also, that is possible. So you can interlink the different processes with one another, and there are a couple of shapes which will help you to do so. And one of those shapes is a process call shape, right? So I hope you understood things so far, right? So what I'm trying to do is, the next thing which Veer brought up, which is a very valid point, is that whenever we see that there is a possibility of reusing some stuff across maybe in the same process or across n number of processes, you can always try to dump that logic into a separate process. So for example, let's forget about this for the timing. Now, if you feel, let's say you wanted to do some error handling also, right? Are we doing any error handling so far? No, right? We are not doing any error handling. Just what we have added a placeholder. Placeholder in the sense there is a catch branch, but we have not added any logic. Let's say if something goes wrong over here anywhere, right? If something goes wrong anywhere here, you would want maybe some kind of alert. Yeah. Or you might want to insert some entry into a database table, right? So let's say you would want to log few details which are very important. Let's say maybe the name of the process. Yeah. Error type. What is the meaning of error type? Whether it is a technical error or a business error, probably, right? Or maybe some kind of error code. If it is there, error message, error date time, maybe the request payload for which you got an error, right? What else? Some kind of unique identifier. In Boomi, for all the executions which happen, there is a unique identifier called as execution ID. I'll explain about this. So there might be few more things which you might want to get a hold of. So the point I'm trying to say is that now we have developed the process that is working absolutely fine. But yesterday, do you remember when I chose the wrong naming convention for the file? Okay, it threw an error. And when you get an error, you get a red color, that bold mark over the shape, and your process might get completely errored out if you do not have a proper error handling. But right now, since we had some sort of error handling, the control might have come over here and the flow of execution would stop gracefully. But then even if it stops, it does not help the cause, because as a support person or as a business guy, oh, I don't get any notification, right? Because the whole idea of having the error handling is that if there is an error, we should do something, which is not happening right now, right? So try branch gets executed and control comes to the catch branch only when something gets errored out. Yes or no? Now, what I want to ask you is, let's say I developed 20 different processes. So would you like to do 20 times error handling for all processes separately? No, right? Because that is a cumbersome process. If not 20, let's say if there are 200 processes, you would not want to write the error handling logic 200 times in 200 different processes, because that will make, first of all, your life tough, that you have to write the same or more or less similar logic multiple times. And another thing is maintainability is very, very tough, right? If something needs to change, I have to go and change at 200 places, which is very, very time consuming. And there are a lot of chances that we might end up creating some inconsistency across those 200 instances. So in all such cases where we see the scope of reusability, especially in the cases like error handling or the cases like this one, we should try to convert those logics into separate processes, and the shape which can help us to establish the connectivity between these two separate processes is process call shape, and there is one more shape called as process route shape. Okay, so what I want to tell you is, this is very, very important. Whenever we want to call one process from another process, there are two shapes. Okay, what are those two shapes? Process call shape, and what is the next? Process route shape. Okay, now if people might try to confuse you in the interview, that are these only the two ways we have to establish a connectivity from one process to another? Answer is no. We can establish that connectivity in some other means also, but if we are talking about shapes, yes, these are the two shapes we have. What are the other means to establish a connectivity? We'll talk about that. Now, these two shapes have significant differences. Okay, so for now, for the time being, I will park process route shape and we will talk about the process call shape. This is capable of calling one process from another, right? Now, what do we do here? So I realized that, okay, error handling is what I want to do. That is the important piece which is missing from my process, because if something gets error out, I don't have a mechanism to retrieve those errors, right? So now let's say I want to call a separate process here. Okay. And it is asking for some configurations. Process call shape allows to execute another process from within a process. The sub process call is considered as a separate distinct process execution. The sub process execution result displays on the manage menus, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So it is like a separate process. So I'm saying here error handling process. Okay. Or maybe something like call to error handling process. And here I can go and I can give some name. Process error handling. Okay, something like this. Okay, it comes with a star shape of some default configurations. I'm not touching that, and this is how it looks. So you are trying to call another process, and that process job is to do error handling. Now you have to tell me that, let's say there is some common error handling process, right? For the timing, let's assume that error handling process is just capable of inserting the error details into the database. Okay, it may have few more functionalities such as writing an email to a support team, right? Or creating a ticket in some ticketing system, right? So, or maybe there might be a Slack channel, right? I'm not sure how many of you have used Slack, but Slack is more like a formal or communicator. So we might want to write a Slack channel wherein we might want to send the details so that the turnaround time is less. So there are n number of things which can be done in the error handler, but which process will actually have the error details? The error handling process or the process where the error is occurring? Let's say I want to develop a common error handling process which is capable of processing the errors from the different processes, right? Right now we are working on, let's say, sync employees disk to DB. It might be sync payroll disk to DB also. It might be sync partners disk to DB also, right? It might be sync customers disk to DB also. So my question is, I want to develop a common error handling process which is robust enough to handle different types of errors that might arise in my different processes. And in that case, which process should feed the error details? Will the error details be there with the error handling process or the process where the error is happening?
Where process is having.
So this process, error handling process, right? How can you go to the error handling process? You can see a hyperlink over here. If you click on this, you will go to the error handling process where we have not written any kind of logic. But the point which I'm trying to convey over here is, now this is the process which will handle the error. But where is the error happening? Error is happening in the parent process. So the error related information typically will be there in the parent process, right? So what information I'm looking for? Let's say to start with, I'm looking for this information. Name of the process means you will give the name of the process where the error has happened, right? Let's say some error type classification, error message, error date time, request payload, execution ID. So these all things will be there in the parent process. Okay, and we'll try to see how do we get those one by one. So now what I want to do is I want to feed that input to the error handling process. So typically what will error handling process tell everyone is that you feed me this input and it will define some schema. What is the meaning of schema?
Structure.
Very nice. It means some structure, right? So see, error handling process cannot accept any structure you feel like, right? So there are 200 different processes. It cannot be developed in a way that it can accept 200 different structures, right? Isn't it? If there has to be something usable across the board, right, then that process will define its own structure and it will request all the calling processes to adhere to the similar structure, isn't it? Otherwise it will not be able to handle, right? So what I'm trying to say is we will define a structure. Let's say we define a structure like this: error details. Okay. And what is that error details? Let's say name of the process, or maybe something like this, process name. Okay. You can use a camel casing if you want. So you define the structure. This structure will be reused across, let's say, process name, right? What is next? Error code. What is next? Error message. Okay. Or maybe let's say error type first. I think there is a mistake in the spelling. Let me correct it everywhere. Yeah. Error, date, time. Okay. What else you can think of, guys? Anything else which I have not written, but you think should be helpful for debugging the error?
Execution ID.
Exception.
What is that?
Execution ID.
Okay. So execution ID, what does that mean is, so whenever any execution happens means whenever your process gets executed, right? There is a unique identifier for each of these executions, which is inherently generated by Boomi, and that ID will help you to track down the issue faster. So you should always try to capture that execution ID, right? So this is an internal ID generated by Boomi, right? And this ID will be unique per execution, and this will help you a lot to track down the error cause. Even you can check logs easily, right? So these are the few things I can think of right now. It might happen that in future also you might come across few things, right? So generally what we do is, I mean, we will not take a decision like this in 5 minutes that these are the fields we need, right? We may have couple of brainstorming sessions where we will discuss with different stakeholders that what else can you think of. We will discuss with the support team that what else do you think, if provided to you, will help you to track the issues faster. And if you do not find anything, you can create some placeholders. Okay, maybe something like reserve field 1. Okay, why it is done so? Because if you're building some common process, that should not be changed so frequently, right? Because it might impact some other processes also. So if you feel that right now I cannot think of anything, but in future something might come my way which I need to accommodate, so you will create some reserve fields, right? Maybe let's say I create 3 right now. So now I may be able to use these reserved fields later on if I encounter something which I did not account for while creating this schema. I mean, this is a very common methodology, nothing new about it. But this is one way where we can just reserve certain placeholders for any type of data which I'm not able to think of right now, but may come in future. Any questions so far, guys? Okay. No questions. Now, another thing is,
So with one question I have. So what will be like what we will insert in this reserve table?
this can be empty for now.
So
Okay.
okay. Mm.
This can be empty for now. Nothing. These are reserved for future purpose. That's all. So now you,
What is if we add these fields later? So what is the issue in that?
no, see these
Because
fields,
anyway, we are not adding any values.
right? So the idea is when you define your whole process, you can take these fields into account. Okay. But right now, like maybe empty or null might be going in. But tomorrow you feel, okay, there is another information. Okay. For example, right now we are writing request payload, right? tomorrow, let's say you might want to send the process logs also as a part of this, right? So instead of creating a new field for logs, you might start sending the logs in the reserved field one, and you will write the logic in such a way that this reserved field will also go to the database. Okay. But then you don't need to change your process again and again, right? Because you might have done the coding in such a way that this reserved field will also get inserted into the database. The only thing which might change is that you might need to add a logic to push the logs over here. But for example, my error handler is there, right? In error handler, since it will be used at n number of places, I might not want that error handler to be redeployed n number of times. Okay. So that is why I'm creating this reserved field.
Okay, but if we have defined like one data type in a database, but it's different, so how will we handle
So
that?
that's why what we can do is when we create a reserved fields, right? So right now I've created 3, let's say we can create 10, right? Maybe 2 for integer, 2 for string, 2 for, and
Okay,
generally reserved fields are created for string types, okay? Because string will always help you to accommodate anything, or maybe you can create
yeah,
CLOB, right? So that you can accommodate all the different possibilities. Yeah.
yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll quickly go and use this now. First of all, make it a habit that you test it, because sometimes we will make some spelling mistake, we will forget to close some element, and we don't realize that. Okay, so this looks good. If it was not good, it will not format it. Okay, so now the question is this format, right? Whichever I have copied over here should go as an input to this error handling process, right? And error handling process should gracefully accept that. Now to send that this whole data as an input, first of all, we created a structure. That was one aspect of it. Another thing is we need to populate all this data, right? Process name, error code, error type, blah, blah things, isn't it? Now you guys tell me, based on the knowledge you have had so far from Boomi, right? I mean, if someone is working on Boomi project, comes with a different knowledge, please don't answer unless I mean, you might already know the answer, right? Because you have learned it somewhere else. So what I'm trying to say is this whole structure has to be fed as an input to this error handling process, right? And when we get the data, we don't have the structure ready, right? We created a structure and now we have to populate the data. How can we do that? Any idea which strikes your mind that this is how maybe I can achieve it? Okay. Now the data which we want to feed is a different format altogether, right? Isn't it? I mean, the one which you started was with an empty document, then you have an XML format, which is employees data. You also have a database format, but the one which you want to produce right now, is it a different format altogether or not?
Yes.
Yes, it's a different format altogether. So now, whenever you want to transform from one format to another, which is the shape we use?
Process to ship.
Which one?
Map.
Map.
For transformation, we typically use map, right? From one format to another.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, we use process, we use map shape. Now, for map shape to work, you should have both source and target. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Right now, do you know the target format?
No.
This is your target, right? This is how
Yes.
this is your target
Database.
format, right? Eventually, you want the data in this format, isn't it? But do you have any source? Do you have any specific source? All your sources are distributed across. I mean, do you have any XML file where you will get all this input, or do you have any single JSON file where you will get all these inputs? No, right? See, we know eventually we want the data in this format. So this is my target. This is my go-to format. But when I want to retrieve all this information, I do not have a single source of information. This whole information might be achievable, but it is distributed across. So what we can do is, even in this case, I could use a map shape. Okay. So when I use a map shape in these kind of cases, what we typically do is we create a source profile with some dummy format. So what I'm trying to say is one of the ways is, let's say I use a map shape. Okay. So now in map shape, I will say, let's say error handler map. Guys, please do focus over here. This is important. And this is important for so that you develop your own thought process, right? When you're working with different shapes. Now here we have source and target. So for target, do we have any format?
Database.
No. No,
This is the format, na? This is the target format, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
So let's say I go here and I'll create error handler .xml. This is kind of a sample file, right? Can I create a sample file out of this? And if I have the sample file, can I create a profile out of this? Because
Yes.
For mapping to happen, you have to have the profile, right? Yes or no?
Yeah.
So I'm creating a new profile, XML, error handler, and there is an option import, choose a file. I go to the D drive straight away. There is error handler XML, open, next, finish. It is more or less the same process we did other day, right? For employees data. Can you see now? Do you have the format defined for the target? What do you say, guys?
Yes.
I'll repeat what I've done. So there was a data format which we mutually decided that these are the things I might need. So for this, I created a sample XML file, right? Which looks like this. And using this sample file, I am creating a profile. Does that make sense? What about source? What about source, guys? Do we have source, any source right now? Okay, another important question which I should ask you is, let's say we read the data. Okay, somehow this data process shape got failed because of some reason. What do you think the data which we'll get in the catch branch of the catch shape of the try catch shape?
Error message.
Same document which it went to try.
Okay.
Empty
So now,
document.
okay, so now this is an important thing you have to understand, because until you know that what is going as an input to the catch branch, you don't know what will be my source format, isn't it? Are you sure what would be a source format over here? So if you're not sure, then you cannot generate this profile, right? Because this profile cannot be dynamic. You have to stick to some structure. So now, first of all, you have to understand what goes as an input to the catch branch of a try catch shape. Now, let's say I read the file over here. This produced an XML file, and after that, it failed over here. A lot of people think that the file which got produced, right, or the last document we had before getting an error will go to the catch branch, or some people, as even one of you mentioned, the error message will go over here. Error message will go, but that will not go as a document. The document which will traverse in the catch branch of the try catch shape will be the same. Okay, will be the same as was an input to the try branch of the try catch shape. So what was the input to the try branch of the try catch shape?
Empty document.
And who passed that empty document?
Start shape.
Start shape.
Start shape of no data type,
No data
right?
type. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is there is an empty document which came in over here. That same document went into the try branch of the try catch shape. So you will get the same document which was passed to the try branch in the catch branch also. So which means the document which will come over here is which kind of document? It is going to be empty document. So now if you want to, let's say, get an error, let's simulate an error. I will deliberately change the connection details so that we get an error. Okay, before we run all this, let's see what is happening. unable to initialize the map. What it is saying, unable to initialize map, and what is saying, from profile is undefined. Where didn't we define the from profile?
You had to change the profile name
In a
in the map.
mapper, we did not give source.
Profile is not defined in the map shape.
Exactly. So you see, understand this. Right now, it is not exactly showing you by that green color hello mark, but right now, even before it could initialize, it could check, run it. It did some sanity check even before executing process, and that sanity check says that in this profile you do not have, or in this map you do not have any source profile, which is incorrect. Yes. So I go here and let's say I create some dummy profile for the time being. Okay, I will name this as some dummy profile. Okay, this is just a single placeholder, that's all, nothing more than that. Now I will run it again. Okay, you will encounter these kind of errors when you start working, so you have to make a note of these errors. Right now the error which we got is, what was the error? The error was that from profile was missing. We fixed the from profile issue. Now you got an error, executing blah blah blah, invalid username password. And where is that invalid username password error happening? Over here, right? But the control ideally should have gone to the catch branch or not? Or it should have gone to the catch branch, right? That's the
Yeah.
whole purpose. Or what do you think? So now let's come back here. Let's go to the try-catch shape. In try-catch shape also there are certain configurations. What is this configuration? There is a document error and there is all errors, which means this try-catch shape can help you to handle two different types of error, document errors and all errors. So document errors will typically be related to the data issues. Okay, if you will have some data issues in a specific document, that will typically fall into the document error. But right now the issue is with the connectivity, right? If the connectivity itself fails, can any document process? No, right? So what I'm trying to say is, if you want to handle all the possible errors, you have to choose all errors. Sometimes what we want to do is, we don't want to handle all the errors. We want to only handle the data specific errors. In that case, what we might be wanting to do is, we might choose document errors. But right now, in this case, I want this to be like a global error handler for my process. If anything goes wrong with my process, it should be handled over here. Now let me run it again. I'll repeat that in the try catch shape, there is a configuration that decides that what type of error you want to handle. Okay. There is a configuration which decides what type of error you want to handle, and that error possibilities are document error and all errors. So right now, the moment I selected document errors, it was not working as expected. Now I selected all errors. Can you see the control started going to the catch branch? Yes. And in the catch branch, just understand this, guys. In the catch branch, when I go to the shape source data, what is coming as an input? Empty document, right? Now for empty document, do you have any profile you can create? I mean, what types of profile you have? You have XML profile, you have a flat file, you have a DB, you have a JSON, you have an EDI. But whatever the data is coming, ideally has to be in sync with this, right? So right now, why we got an error? Because the expectation of the source profile is which format? Which format is being accepted by the source profile? XML profile, right? Guys, what happened? Why you're not answering? So if you go here in the source profile, what is the expectation? What type of profile is this?
XML.
XML, right? But is the data which is coming from the source in XML format?
No.
No, right? So that's why that mismatch is happening and you're getting at the error at the map shape. Okay. Now, what are the ways to fix this error? One way is that for this dummy profile, I'll create a dummy data. How can I create a dummy data? There is a shape called as a message shape. Now this is another new shape. Write a note here. Message shape is the one which comes from execute category. And it has the tendency to produce a static or dynamic document in the process. It can also be used to transform one format of data to another. Very important point. So far, which shape was only capable of doing the transform from one data format to another?
Map.
The one which we were aware of was map. Now I'm telling that there is one more shape which is also having the similar capability, and that shape is a message shape. So what I'm saying is this message shape has the capability to produce any static or dynamic document. Now you tell me, as per this particular map shape, what is the expected format by this XML profile? What is the expected format? Expected format is something like this. That's all. It is expecting some XML. And what is the name of the element? You can check over here. Right now, the name of the element is element itself. Yes or no?
Yes.
Or else, if you're getting confused, just go here and I'll say manually name this as dummy. This is a dummy element. Now, what is the name of the element expected? A dummy element. So what I'll do is here in the map shape, I'll create an element dummy. Okay. If you want to give some value, you can give. If you don't want to give, you can ignore. Let's say you write, this is a dummy element. Okay. This is a dummy element. So what will this message shape do is it will produce a document. What type of document will it produce?
XML.
XML document, right? Because we have given the XML data over here, isn't it? And why we are doing so? So that it starts matching the expectation of this map. Yeah, let's run it again. Okay, it is saying blah blah blah, no data produced for map. Please check source profile and make sure it matches the source data. That's fine. Let's see what went as an input here. So this went as an input to the which shape? To the map shape, right? So can you see here when the control comes to the cache branch, it is an empty document. After message shape, what is the format of the data? It's a XML, right? So it means message shape is capable of producing some data format. It is capable of producing some document. Yes, but it's still erroring out. And if you want to look at the error, just click here on this, go to the logs, and you see here, no data produced from the map. Please check source profile and make sure it matches source data. So the issue right now, what it says is that the source profile and the source data are not in sync with each other. I'm not sure because I see the profile is in sync. Right now, there is no mapping happening. Do you see any mapping happening over here? Okay. For the time being, I'll just do this dummy mapping to this reserve field 3. For the timing, that's all. I'll just save and close. Let me try to see if it works now. Okay. Now there is another error. What is unexpected error occurred while initializing a shape caused by unexpected error, blah, 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 connector operation not specified. Where is that error happening, guys? That error is not happening in the map shape anymore. Map shape is working. Now the control went to which process? To the sub
Process
process.
version.
In the sub process, did we had some dummy things present or not? Yes. And that's why that error is happening. But your map shape started working. So the point I'm trying to say is, let's come back. Let's go to the sub process. And in the sub process, I will for the time being keep star shape of no data type. Okay. So there were some dummy configurations which were present by default, and I'll add a stop shape. I'll add a simple star shape and a stop shape in the child process or in the sub process. I will arrange all things nicely. Now what I'm trying to say is this is my catch branch. In the catch branch, I added a message shape. That message shape is producing some data, right? What type of data it is producing? It is producing the data which was very much needed over here, right? So if you remember, I told you one point very clearly that the source and targets are mandatory, right? Which you have seen also. And also at least some mapping has to happen. If you just define the source and target profiles, and if there are no mappings, then also it will error out, right? But the moment I did some mapping, the error stopped coming. Now you see, okay, how it worked. Yeah. It got errored out. Can you see now your catch branch is all green? Here, the source is empty document. Here, the source is that dummy document, isn't it? And the same dummy message you're passing over here. Okay, for the time being, you see only reserved field 3, which is fine. You can get other error elements also populated. But by this example, first of all, we have to understand that we have a mechanism to call a subprocess, which is using a process call shape. We can use a message shape to produce some documents. You will see that message shape is very much helpful in many scenarios. We will see more scenarios. And in the map shape, to make it work, we should have profile at both source and target. Only the profiles are not sufficient. Some mapping also has to be there, right? And this structure eventually we need to populate, which we have not done so far. We will do it. Don't worry. But this is one way to produce that structure which is required by the error handler. There are other ways also. If you feel this is complex, there are more easy way. And why I have not started going with that, so that you understand that what are the challenges we might face with this approach, and that's why we might go and adopt a separate or a different approach also for achieving the same requirement, right? So we'll continue looking at it. Okay, any questions, guys, from anyone?
Uh, for sub process,
Mhm.
the execution ID will be separate, or it will be also having a separate execution ID.
Okay, so now for I answering your question, what happens is ideally you should capture your execution ID over here, just immediately after the start and before try cache. And you should store that execution ID over here. And you, because if you will try to capture that execution ID at different places, it's going to get changed. So it is always recommended that you should capture your execution ID over here before the first try catch, because this is another important note which anyhow I'm planning to cover tomorrow, but just since you asked, the execution ID always needs to be captured before the first try catch, as it gets modified after try catch. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll capture that over here. So when I say why do we need to capture, because the one which you can see even in the process reporting tab later on, right, which I'm going to tell what is process reporting tab, will be the one which is produced at the first place. Whenever it gets modified, those are like child execution ID. If you want to hold the parent execution ID, that you will get over here. And using that only you can retrieve your whole flow. Using child execution IDs, you cannot retrieve your whole flow. Yeah. Any other questions, guys, from anyone?